In this short video, we're going to look at the key elements in a typical health and safety management system. If you look at any organization, it can be daunting trying to figure out exactly where to start and what to do. International standards such as OSAS 18001, which is soon to be superseded by ISO 45001, provide a great framework for any organization who wants to implement a management system. The difficulty, however, is knowing where to start. Let's look at it another way. You have employees who come to work. They have jobs to do and they have tasks to perform, and many times these tasks are associated with standard operating procedures. A key job here is to know who your employees are and the jobs they do. It can be a little bit more difficult, of course, to figure out exactly what tasks they're performing. Once you know this, you can then set about putting together a competency profile for your employees. Competency means, do they have the appropriate knowledge and experience and training to do the work? And from this as well, you can build up an organizational chart or organogram which shows the hierarchy of your company from top to bottom. It's important on this chart though to show the specific roles that health and safety plays and additional roles such as health and safety committees and health and safety officers as well. Because people are at work and they're performing tasks, these tasks can, I suppose, expose people to hazards, and they can also create hazards, for example, by not performing the job in a safe manner. For OSAS 18000, we're interested in health and safety hazards, but there are similar systems such as ISO 45000 for the environment, ISO 22000 for food safety, and other methodologies based around HAZOPs. Inside here, the key thing is based on risk assessments. One of the key challenges though is that many organizations don't know what type of assessments to perform. Unless you're aware of the specific legal requirements, you're not going to be sure that your system is being effective. The key thing about legislation is that there can be severe fines and penalties associated with non-compliance. Non-compliance, of course, means having accidents and near misses. You need to be aware of what these are, and usually companies outsource legislation to third-party providers who can provide specific updates for the region that they are in. This should be in the form of just top-line summaries what the regulation is and what you need to do. Legislation says you have to do risk assessments. This is good to know, but usually most organizations don't know exactly how to go about this in an effective manner. Typically, there are 3 steps in the risk assessment process. You have to identify hazards, assess risks, and put controls in place. Arguably, steps 1 and 3 here are the most important one. If you don't have a hazard checklist, it can be quite difficult to go about doing your work effectively. The health and safety legislation will identify some hazards, for example, chemicals, manual handlings, working at height, but there are a whole range of other hazards where it just says a hazard is something that causes you harm and you have to assess it. So by developing your own checklist of hazards will help you to consistently and comprehensively identify hazards in each area and activity of your workplace. The risk assessment part is something some companies get hung up on. It's important, but it just simply is a prioritization system. If you have, for example, 400 hazards, it may not be reasonably practicable to fix all of these in one go. You may not have the time, the resources, either financial or human or otherwise inside to do this. So by prioritizing the hazards using a risk-based scoring system, you can put more attention to the high risks ahead of the low risks, but it does not mean for one moment that the low risks are any less important than the high risks. The third part is looking at controls. So basically when we're doing risk assessments, we have to make sure that there are enough controls in place to manage the hazard. There's a hierarchy we apply, which means can we eliminate the hazard? Can we substitute it with something less potent or toxic or dangerous? Can we engineer out the hazard? Can we apply administrative controls in the form of procedures, records and signage? What training can we provide? What monitoring can we do? And again, monitoring can be in the form of calibration, maintenance, audits, inspections or supervision. And lastly, the last line of defense, certainly, but it is not the most important control, is personal protective equipment. So by going through and putting attention on step 1, which is hazard identification, and step 3, risk control, we can then set about developing the rest of our management system. We'll see shortly that by identifying all the risk controls, we're developing the rest of the management system elements, and that this key part of the system is basically the cornerstone of everything. Once you go about developing your system, and once you know what jobs are there, and you've trained people, and you've done the risk assessments, you're up to date with legislation, etc., a certain complacency can kick in. So what standards need you to do is keep an eye on things in the form of various checks. These checks can come in the form of audits and inspections, and coming out from these you'll typically have audit findings or non-conformities. Once we have issues identified in the form of non-conformances, we can then apply corrective actions. Corrective actions are jobs assigned to somebody with a specific time frame. Another form of review is something that happens typically at least annually with the senior management team, where they'd look at the whole system, all of the key elements we've been looking at so far, and they'd just check, are each of these elements working effectively, or are there some bottlenecks in there that we need to address and fix? Occasionally, incidents or accidents may happen. Accidents and near misses need to be reported and proper root cause analysis carried out to make sure that the incident does not happen again, or potentially will not happen again. Inside, one of the key things you need to look at here is that the accident report and investigation process is under the umbrella of emergency preparedness and response. You need to know what potential accidents and incidents could happen at your facility, and you need to be able to respond effectively to these. How do you know? Well, we go back to our friend, the risk assessment process. Accidents and incidents can happen because perhaps you did not identify the hazard in the risk assessment process. The hazards that lead to accidents and incidents are things like fires, spill, explosions, gas leaks, etc. Another scenario is that you had identified the hazard, but you didn't have the controls in place that were necessary to control that hazard. And yet another scenario is you had the hazard identified, you had the controls in place on paper, but these were not being managed effectively. So one key element of any incident report and investigation system is that you can come back and make sure you update the risk assessment process, because that will have let you down to have caused the accident/incident to begin with. Another key part as well is your management of change or change control. Anytime you introduce changes to materials, processes, or people, you need to manage this effectively. Risk assessments need to be done in advance of any change to approve the change. Then the design phase can kick in. It may move on to the construction phase and eventually to handover. If an effective management of change system will actually look at minor changes and major changes. But it's important that these are all linked back again to your risk assessment process. Another key element is having a health and safety policy. You typically see these at receptions or at securities when you arrive on site, and various other strategic locations around the site. This is typically the company's commitment to improvements in the next 3 to 5 years. They are aspirational in nature. In the health and safety policy, things you see like we're committed to complying with all legal and other requirements. We're committed also to complying or to preventing incidents. So inside there, those commitments are easy to put on print, but how you're going to achieve them is a different challenge. To do that, we have a part of the system called objectives, or objectives, targets and plans. Inside here, you specify exactly what you're going to do to achieve the aspirations within the policy document and elsewhere to improve health and safety within your organization. Again, the standard sets out the basic frameworks for what a health and safety policy needs to look like. And of course, the last bit that holds everything together is the document control process. Every document you have needs to have a proper title, version number, and a workflow process to make sure that relevant people review and authorize the documents before they're all made live on your system. You'll end up with a health and safety manual, and the hierarchy or nomenclature system to follow is that of the OSAS 18001 standard. For example, section 4.2 of your manual should be the same as the health and safety policy. Some sections of your manual will refer out to related procedures and records. For example, training in the manual will have a related procedure and record. The same for risk assessments and audits. Some sections of your manual, though, however, will not refer out to related procedures, and this typically will be the health and safety policy, where there is no related procedure and record per se. So not all elements of the health safety manual will have related procedures and records. Other documents may have is a registered legislation. As I said, typically they're provided by third-party service providers in most organizations. Risk control is where it all happens. A good risk assessment system with adequate detail or good detail inside in your risk controls will mean you'll have a good health and safety system. You'll have identified the proper engineering controls and maintenance routines. You'll have identified the procedures, records and signage that's required. You've identified your training and you can build your competency plans. And you'll have programs in place for doing audits, inspections, calibration, maintenance, supervision, etc. and making sure PPE is in place. All of these things are critical, and as you can see, a lot of the risk control overlaps with all of the health and safety management system elements that are in the standards such as OSAS 18001. Monitoring itself, well, there's a whole lot of it that can go on, and that's why monitoring is a critical control measure within the whole process. We recently published a manual that we hope will help organizations implement effective health and safety management systems. The manual gives you an overview of the different clauses of the standard, but inside there as well we give you suggested templates that you can adopt straight away to implement, so things like for training or risk assessment processes, etc. inside there. So it tells you what you need to do, but we also give you hints on how to do that inside there. When you go through, you'll see that the contents cover the typical requirements of your management system standards. And we've also created a LinkedIn website, because while the book gives you plenty of practical examples on how to implement a health and safety management system, and we provide templates, we provide additional templates through the LinkedIn group, and also we can have discussion forums and share other resources as appropriate. We'd love to hear from you. We've contact numbers available here for the US, the UK, and also in Ireland. Or send us an email to sales@centreofexcellence.org. We also have the book where you can try a sample or simply download it using the website link provided here. Thank you for your time.